I'm freezing human. I beg you to let me in. I'll reward you. Amazing promises of the alien woman. The night was unusually cold, even for the remote settlement where David lived. Frost coated the edges of his small wooden house, and the wind whistled through the gaps in the old walls. He sat near the fireplace, a mug of tea warming his hands, feeling the quiet of the night settle into his bones. Life in this part of the world was lonely, but David had grown used to it. The solitude allowed him to work on his wood carvings and enjoy the peace that the bustling cities never offered. Yet tonight the cold seemed sharper, almost alive, and it carried with it a strange feeling David could not explain. The silence was broken by a faint sound, a soft knock at the door. David froze. It was unusual for anyone to come this far, especially at this hour. The knock came again, more urgent this time, almost desperate. He put down his mug and stood, listening. It was not a normal sound like that of a human voice or even an animal. It carried an unusual rhythm, irregular but insistent. His heart pounded in his chest. Should he open the door? Should he ignore it? Part of him told him it might be dangerous. He had read stories of travelers lost in the woods, and he had even heard rumors of strange creatures in the surrounding forests. But another part of him, the part that had grown up with his mother's stories of helping those in need, whispered that he could not leave whoever, or whatever, out in the cold to suffer. David approached the door slowly, his breath forming small clouds in the icy air. He peered through the small glass pane at eye level, but the darkness made it hard to see. Then he noticed something lying in the snow, a figure, small and fragile, huddled against the wall of the porch. Her skin seemed pale, almost glowing in the faint light of the moon. Her eyes were closed, and she shivered violently with every gust of wind. David's heart tightened. Whoever she was in desperate need of help. Without thinking twice, he opened the door a little wider. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly, stepping outside. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. David froze in shock. She was not human. Her features were delicate but different. Her skin had a subtle shimmer, and her eyes were larger than a normal human's, reflecting the pale moonlight in a strange, captivating way. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and relief, as if she had been waiting for him. Her voice, when it came, was weak and almost musical. "Please, human, I am freezing. I beg you, let me in. I will reward you, I promise." David hesitated, his mind racing. The logical part of him screamed to shut the door. How could he trust this stranger? But he could not ignore the shivering figure in the snow. His heart overruled his fear. "Okay, come inside," he said, opening the door fully. The woman moved slowly, almost like a shadow, her limbs trembling. David helped her to the threshold and wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders. She sank to the floor, curling into herself like a frightened animal. The warmth from the fireplace began to reach her, and she exhaled a sigh that sounded almost like music, filled with relief and gratitude. David stepped back, trying to study her without alarming her. Who are you?" he asked. The woman's lips trembled as she spoke, her voice weak but sincere. "I am far from home. I was not expecting to be found. I am alone. They are coming for me." Her words were fragmented, and she shivered again. David instinctively brought her a warm cup of tea, holding it carefully so she could sip it. The warmth seemed to help, and she took it with trembling hands. Her eyes, wide and shining, focused on him as if searching for trust. "Thank you," she whispered. You do not know how much this means." David watched her closely. He noticed the subtle differences in her appearance, the gentle glow of her skin, the faint lines that did not match human anatomy, the slightly pointed ears partially hidden under her hair. His rational mind tried to make sense of it. Was she really an alien, or was this some trick? He shook his head. It didn't matter. She was alive and she needed help. That was enough for him. He guided her to a chair near the fireplace, wrapping another blanket around her. The woman sat silently, staring into the flames. She seemed to be gathering strength, her body slowly relaxing in the warmth. David decided to give her space, leaving her to recover while he prepared a small meal. When he returned, he found her looking at him with a new intensity, almost as if she were trying to communicate something beyond words. I will reward you," she said again, her voice trembling. "Not with wealth, not as you think, but you will see your kindness. It will change everything." David nodded slowly, unsure what to say. He did not need a reward. He had helped her because it was right. Yet her words carried a strange weight, a promise he could not ignore. The night deepened, and the cold outside seemed harsher than ever. Snow piled up against the door and the wind howled through the trees. David made sure the windows were secure, that the fire stayed strong, and that the woman had enough warmth to survive the night. She remained quiet, sometimes murmuring softly in her own language which he could not understand. Still, there was a calmness in her presence, a strange comfort that filled the room. Hours passed, and David finally allowed himself to sit down near her. "You must be exhausted," he said gently. She nodded, leaning slightly toward the warmth of the fire. "Yes, I have been running from them, from those who would harm me. I did not know where to go." Her voice was soft, almost fragile, yet there was a strength beneath it, a determination to survive. David realized that despite her weakness, she had endured far more than he could imagine. Curiosity overcame his caution. "Where are you from? What are you?" The woman hesitated, glancing toward the shadows of the room. "Far from here, a place you would not understand. I am not like you, but I need help, and I trust you." Her words were hesitant, but there was sincerity in them that David could not deny. He could feel the truth in her voice, the desperation, and the courage it took to ask for help. David decided not to press for answers. There would be time later. For now, he simply provided warmth, food, and safety. The alien woman, sensing the kindness, began to relax, her body slowly shedding some of the tension it had carried for so long. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them, reflecting a life beyond his comprehension. As the night wore on, a bond began to form, fragile but undeniable. Two strangers from entirely different worlds, connected through a simple act of compassion. The woman, though silent for long stretches, occasionally whispered promises of a reward that David could not yet understand. Yet the real reward, he realized, was in the moment itself, in the act of helping someone in need, without expectation, without hesitation. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside there was warmth, safety, and a sense of fragile hope. The alien woman, still shivering, slowly drifted into a deep, restful sleep. David watched over her, aware of the responsibility he had taken on, but also filled with a strange sense of wonder. He had opened the door that night, and in doing so, he had stepped into a story far larger than himself, one that would change both of their lives in ways he could not yet imagine. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the frosted windows, David knew that this night would not be forgotten. The alien woman stirred, blinking sleep from her glowing eyes. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. David only nodded. "I didn't do it for that," he said simply. But she smiled faintly, a mysterious smile that hinted at truths and promises beyond his understanding. The wind outside had calmed, and the snow now glistened in the early morning light. The world seemed quieter, but for David, the events of the night had opened a door, not just to his home, but to a new reality, one filled with possibility, danger, and wonder. He knew their story had only begun, and that the promise of the alien woman was something far more incredible than anything he could have imagined. For now, they were safe. For now, the human had answered the desperate call of the unknown. And as the warmth of the fire continued to chase away the chill, David realized that some choices made in the cold and dark could light the way for the rest of a lifetime. The morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows, casting a soft glow on the small room where David and the alien woman now sat. She had awakened early, her eyes scanning the room with curiosity and caution. Even in the gentle morning light, her beauty and strangeness were remarkable. Her skin, faintly glowing in the sunlight, seemed almost translucent. Her eyes, large and expressive, held a depth that David could not understand, as though they carried memories of a place far beyond his world. David had prepared a simple breakfast, a warm bowl of porridge and some tea. He placed it carefully on the small table beside her, and she looked at it with mild confusion. She had never eaten food like this before. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the spoon, still not fully accustomed to the motions of human life. David watched her quietly, trying not to seem intrusive. "You don't have to eat if you're not ready," he said gently. She shook her head, her large eyes meeting his. "I must eat," she whispered. "To survive." Her voice was soft, almost musical, but each word carried a weight of experience and exhaustion. She took the spoon in her hand, hesitated, and then slowly began to eat. David realized that every movement she made was deliberate, as if she were learning how to exist in this world step by step. After breakfast, David offered her a seat by the fireplace again. You should rest, he said. You've been through a lot. You need your strength? She nodded but remained quiet. For a long time she just stared into the flames, her thoughts hidden behind her expressive eyes. David sensed that she wanted to speak, but words were difficult for her. I owe you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. For saving me, you could have refused. David shook his head. I don't turn people away, not when they need help. Her eyes softened, and for the first time he saw a faint smile. I trust you, she said. David felt a shiver run down his spine, not from cold, but from the weight of her words. Trust was not given lightly, and for her to offer it after only one night meant more than he could measure. The rest of the morning passed quietly. David explained small things about his home and the settlement, careful not to overwhelm her. She listened intently, her head tilted slightly, absorbing the details of his world like a student learning a new language. Occasionally she asked questions, simple ones at first, but with curiosity that hinted at a mind far beyond human experience. Why do you live alone? She asked. David paused before answering. I like the quiet, he said, and the solitude helps me think. It's safe here in a way, but it can be lonely, she nodded slowly. I understand loneliness, she murmured. I have known much of it in my life, alone, afraid, hiding, always hiding. Her words were fragmented, but David understood enough. She had experienced fear and isolation, much like him, though for reasons he could barely imagine. As the day progressed, she began to move more freely around the small house. David showed her how to use simple tools, how to light the fire, and how to pour tea without spilling it. Each motion was careful, deliberate, but there was a grace in the way she learned. He could see that she was intelligent, quick to adapt, and observant in ways that humans often were not. By midday, she had recovered enough strength to speak more about her situation. I ran from those who hunt me, she explained. I am not safe in my world. They want to capture me, to control me, to use me. David listened intently. He did not interrupt, but the tension in the room was palpable. He could feel her fear, the memory of being hunted, and the desperation in her voice. She shivered slightly, though the fire had warmed her, and David instinctively moved closer, offering a comforting presence. You don't need to worry, he said quietly. Here you are safe. I will not let anyone hurt you. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. You are unlike anyone I have met, she said. I did not expect trust so quickly. David smiled faintly. Sometimes people or beings just need to help each other, that's all there is to it. She considered his words, her gaze drifting to the window. Outside, the snow sparkled under the pale sunlight, untouched and silent. The day moved slowly, filled with small tasks and quiet conversation. She learned the names of simple objects, the teapot, the spoon, the firewood. David realized that she had been isolated from human, or even earthly, life for so long that even basic items were unfamiliar. Yet her mind was sharp, and she learned quickly. Her hands, delicate and precise, mimicked his movements with surprising skill. By evening, she could make a simple cup of tea almost perfectly. As the sun began to set, David decided to take her outside. You need to see the world around you, he said. Even if it's cold, even if it's new, you need to feel it. She hesitated, shivering at the thought of the cold, but nodded. Wrapped in thick blankets and with David supporting her, they stepped into the fresh snow. The crisp air was sharp in her lungs, but she seemed fascinated. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the snow-covered trees, and the pale light reflecting off the frozen ground. She reached out a hand, letting the snowflakes land on her fingers, and her face lit up with wonder. It is beautiful, she whispered. Not like my home, but beautiful in a different way. David smiled, happy to see her enjoying the simple pleasures he often took for granted. This is your world now, he said. And you're safe here for now. She looked at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something he could not name. You saved me, and I will repay you, she said softly. Her promise, repeated again and again, carried no greed, only sincerity. As night fell, they returned inside. She helped David with small chores, moving more confidently and even laughing softly when she made minor mistakes. David felt a strange sense of companionship he had not known in years. Despite their differences, they were learning to rely on each other. The alien woman who had come to him as a fragile, freezing figure in the snow was beginning to regain her strength and independence. Later, as they sat by the fire once more, she spoke in a quiet voice. I want to understand your world to learn to know how to survive here with you, David nodded. Then I will teach you, step by step. You don't have to rush, you don't have to fear, you're safe. She looked at him, and for a moment the weight of her fear seemed to lift. Thank you, she whispered. The night was long, but it passed peacefully. David realized that he had begun to care for her deeply, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted her to be safe and happy. And the alien woman, despite her mysterious past and otherworldly appearance, had begun to trust him completely. By the next morning, she was able to move almost freely around the house. Her voice had strengthened, her eyes sparkled with renewed life, and her small smiles hinted at a personality that was gradually emerging. She asked questions about David's life, about the settlement, and even about the snow that had fascinated her so much. Each question revealed her curiosity and intelligence, and David found himself enjoying the lessons they exchanged. But even as comfort and trust grew, a shadow remained. She would occasionally glance toward the distant forest, a flicker of fear in her eyes, as if she still remembered the hunters she had escaped. David noticed but did not push her to speak. He understood that trust had to grow slowly and that she had to feel secure on her own terms. By the end of the second day, the alien woman was able to sit by the fire without trembling. She had eaten, drank, and even attempted to speak longer sentences. Her promises of reward were still mentioned occasionally, but now they seemed less like desperate bargains and more like a gentle reminder of the bond forming between them. David did not focus on what she meant by reward. He only knew that her presence had changed the quiet rhythm of his life in ways he had not anticipated. For the first time in years, David felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his own simple existence. He was no longer just a man living alone in the cold. He was a guardian, a teacher, and a friend to someone extraordinary. And the alien woman, who had appeared in his doorway as a shivering figure of desperation, was beginning to see a world filled with hope, warmth, and human kindness. The day ended with quiet reflection. They sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames filling the room, and David realized that what had started as an act of simple compassion had grown into something far greater. Trust had begun to blossom, fear had started to fade, and a connection was forming that neither of them could ignore. Outside, the snow fell gently, and the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the human and the alien shared warmth, stories, and a fragile sense of safety. Neither knew what the next days would bring, but one thing was certain. The act of opening the door had set in motion a story that neither of them could have imagined. A story of trust, survival, and the slow, powerful unfolding of friendship between two beings from entirely different worlds. The days that followed were quiet, but the air between David and the alien woman was changing. She had grown stronger, more confident in her movements, and more willing to speak about her past. Each word she shared seemed to carry a world of experiences, and David listened with rapt attention, fascinated by a life so unlike his own. She had arrived as a fragile, frightened being in the snow, and now she was slowly becoming more human in her presence, though still undeniably otherworldly. One morning, after the fire had warmed the small house and the frost on the windows had begun to melt, she finally began to tell her story. "I was not always safe," she said, her voice quiet but steady. David nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Where I come from, there are those who control others to use for power or for experiments. I escaped, but they followed me across worlds." Her words were halting, but the meaning was clear. David felt a chill run through him, even though the room was warm. He reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers. "You don't have to face them alone here," he said. She looked at him, her large eyes reflecting gratitude and fear. "I cannot stay forever. It is not safe, even here, if they find me." David understood that her fear was not a story or an exaggeration. There was truth in her words, a fear rooted in experience. "I will protect you," he said simply. "As long as I can, no one will hurt you under my watch." Her expression softened, but she shook her head slightly. "I thank you, but my world is bigger than this place, and I cannot hide forever. I must find a way to stop them or escape completely." She paused, taking a deep breath, and for a moment the room was filled with silence. David could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire for freedom, the fear of pursuit, and the trust she was trying to place in him. Over the next days, their routines settled into a quiet rhythm. She helped David with chores around the house, learned to use simple tools, and practiced small exercises to regain her strength. Each night, they would sit by the fire, and she would ask him questions about the human world. Sometimes she would stare out the window at the forest beyond, her expression thoughtful and distant. David noticed her hesitation and never pressed her, understanding that she carried the weight of a past that could not be shared lightly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, she spoke again of her past. "I had companions once," she said softly. "Friends like you who helped me before I had to leave, but they were taken." Her voice trembled slightly, and David could feel the depth of her sorrow. "I have been running for a long time, hiding, always hiding and trusting no one." She paused, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames of the fire. David did not speak immediately. He understood that some stories could not be hurried. "I'm here now," he said finally. "You can trust me, you don't have to run anymore." She looked at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. "I hope you are right," she said quietly, "but I cannot forget what I have lost or the danger that follows me." The trust between them continued to grow. She began to share more details about her world, the places she had been, and the dangers she had faced. She explained that her people were not all like those who hunted her. Many were peaceful, kind, and valued freedom. But the ones after her were cruel, seeking control over others. David listened, fascinated and horrified, trying to imagine a world so different from his own. As the days turned into a week, a new tension began to build. David noticed her glancing toward the forest more often, her eyes alert, her body tense. She was not afraid of him, but she was aware of the outside world and the dangers it could hold. One afternoon, as they prepared a simple meal together, she spoke again. "I think they may be closer than before," she said cautiously. "I felt something watching when I slept." David felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the realization that danger might be approaching. "I will help you," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." She looked at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and concern. "You are brave for saying that, but I cannot risk anyone else being hurt because of me." David shook his head. "You are not alone anymore. I will not let them take you, and I will not let anyone get hurt because of you. We will be careful, and we will be ready." The alien woman nodded slowly, and for a moment they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken fears hanging between them. Then she smiled faintly, a small gesture that seemed to lighten the room. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." David smiled back, feeling the connection between them grow stronger with each passing day. Over the next few days, they made plans for what to do if danger arrived. David reinforced the house, secured the windows, and cleared the surrounding area of anything that could be used to sneak up on them. She taught him small techniques to stay hidden and to sense unusual movements, using skills from her world that were entirely new to him. David was amazed at her knowledge and the way she adapted to his world, blending her experience with his practical skills. One night, as they sat by the fire, she shared more about the promises she had made. "I spoke of reward, but not as you understand it," she said. "It is not wealth or treasure. It is knowledge, protection, the chance to see things you cannot yet imagine." David listened, intrigued but cautious. "You don't have to explain everything now," he said. "I just want you to be safe." She nodded, her large eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "I will show you when the time is right, but for now, trust is enough." As the days went by, the bond between them deepened. They shared meals, stories, and small moments of quiet joy. She began to laugh softly at his jokes, and he found himself laughing at her curiosity and wonder. Despite the looming danger, there were moments of peace, moments where they could forget the world outside and simply exist together. However, the tension never fully left the air. She would occasionally pause mid-sentence, her ears twitching slightly, her eyes scanning the shadows outside. David knew that the hunters were still out there, searching, and that their time in safety was limited. "We must be ready," she said one evening. "They will not stop until they find me or until I find a way to protect myself." David nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "We will be ready," he said firmly. "No matter what comes, we will face it together." She looked at him with a mixture of relief and admiration. "I have not felt this in a long time. Trust, safety, hope." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that David could feel deep in his chest. The next day, they ventured outside briefly, testing the perimeter around the house and preparing for any signs of danger. She moved with grace and confidence, her senses alert to the slightest changes in the environment. David followed, learning from her instincts and adapting his own movements. They worked together seamlessly, a team formed from necessity and trust. As evening fell, they returned to the warmth of the fire. She sat quietly for a while, staring into the flames, and then spoke. "I feel safe with you, but I cannot forget the world I come from or the danger that follows me." David reached out, taking her hand gently. "Then we will face it together," he said. "I will not let you face it alone." She looked at him, and for the first time her expression was not fearful, but resolute. Over the following days, the alien woman continued to regain strength, and David continued to teach her about his world. They shared stories of their pasts, their fears, and their dreams. She taught him about her world in return, about places filled with light and beauty, about creatures he could not imagine, and about a life beyond Earth that was full of wonder and complexity. Through these exchanges, David realized that the real reward she had promised was not something material, but something far deeper. It was the sharing of knowledge, the building of trust, and the forging of a bond that transcended worlds. The alien woman had brought a new perspective into his life, one that expanded his understanding of the universe and of the power of compassion. As another quiet night settled over the settlement, they sat together by the fire. The alien woman leaned slightly toward him, her expression thoughtful. "I will need to leave eventually," she said softly. "But I want to stay until I am ready to face them or to find a solution." David nodded, understanding the inevitability of her journey. "Then stay as long as you need," he said. "You're safe here and I will help you prepare for whatever comes next." She smiled faintly, a small gesture of gratitude and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything, for your trust, for your kindness." David smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the fire. He knew that their story was far from over and that the days ahead would bring challenges, danger, and new discoveries. But for now they had each other, and that was enough. The night outside grew colder, but inside, the warmth of trust, friendship, and hope filled the small house. The alien woman, once lost, frightened, and alone, had found a refuge. And David, once isolated and lonely, had found a companion, a teacher, and a friend from a world beyond his imagination. The days that followed were tense, though David and the alien woman tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. The morning sun would shine through the frosted windows, lighting the small wooden house, but shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. She had grown stronger and more confident, moving around with ease and helping David with daily chores. Yet despite her growing comfort, she remained alert, constantly listening, watching, and waiting. David could see it in her posture, in the way her head would tilt slightly at unfamiliar sounds, in the way her eyes would dart to the trees beyond the clearing. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in deep shades of purple and orange, she paused at the window, her face tense. "I sense them," she said softly. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the fear she had carried for so long. David moved to stand beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Who?" he asked. She did not answer immediately, only pointing toward the distant tree line. There, shadows moved with subtle precision, and David realized with a start that she was not imagining it. "They are close," she whispered. "Not far, maybe hours away. If we are not careful, they will find us or follow me here." David felt a cold shiver despite the warmth of the room. For days, he had felt that danger was approaching, but now he could see it. The forest, quiet and still, hid figures that would bring harm if they discovered her. He looked at her, determination setting in. "We will face this together," he said firmly. "No matter what happens, I will not let them take you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself to lean slightly against him. I hope you are right," she murmured, but even as she spoke, tension returned. She began to help David reinforce the house. Windows were secured with extra wooden planks, gaps were filled to keep cold and intruders out, and a perimeter around the house was cleared of anything that could be used for concealment. Every movement was deliberate, every action focused on survival. David watched her closely. The alien woman, though physically smaller and delicate in appearance, moved with a strength and intelligence that surprised him. She instructed him on simple ways to sense movements, subtle shifts in the air, and even sounds that humans often overlooked. He followed her instructions carefully, learning to see the forest differently, to notice things that once would have gone unnoticed. Together, they prepared for what might come, their teamwork forming a silent bond built on trust and necessity. Days passed, and the sense of impending danger grew stronger. David noticed changes in her behavior. She would pause mid-sentence, her ears twitching, her eyes scanning the shadows. She would practice small defensive moves in private. She rarely relaxed completely. He understood that she was preparing him as much as herself, teaching him to anticipate threats that neither of them could predict. One night, the tension broke. There was a noise outside, a soft, deliberate rustle in the trees, followed by another, closer and more insistent. David's heart pounded, but he remained calm, moving quietly to the door with the alien woman beside him. She motioned for him to stay low, and together they peered into the night. Shadows moved with precise coordination, and David realized that they were being watched. The hunters had arrived, or at least scouts of some kind. "They know where I am," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed concern. "We must be careful, or they will follow us here." David nodded, taking in the situation. He had never faced danger like this, yet he felt a strange calm. He trusted her instincts completely, and together they devised a plan. They would not hide passively. The alien woman instructed David to prepare signals, small movements that could distract attention and allow them to move undetected. She also explained that they must create an escape route in case the hunters breached the perimeter. David followed her guidance, carrying out each instruction with precision. The tension was nearly unbearable, yet working together brought a strange comfort. As midnight approached, the hunters drew closer. Shadows flitted through the clearing, the soft crunch of snow under their feet audible even through the careful steps they took. David and the alien woman moved silently inside, using the knowledge she had shared to anticipate their movements. Each time a shadow passed the window, she whispered a direction, and David would adjust, keeping them hidden. The night seemed endless, the danger palpable, and yet they remained calm, trusting each other implicitly. Hours passed, and the hunters finally seemed to retreat, their movements fading into the distance. David exhaled deeply, his body tense from hours of quiet anticipation. The alien woman turned to him, her eyes reflecting relief and exhaustion. "They are gone for now," she whispered. "But we cannot stay forever. They will come again." David nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Their time of safety was temporary, and they needed a longer-term solution. Over the next few days, they planned for the future. The alien woman explained that she had allies, beings from her world who could provide protection and guidance, but contacting them would be risky. She would need David's help, his understanding of human environments, and his ability to think creatively. David agreed without hesitation. "I will do whatever it takes," he said firmly. "We will face whatever comes together." As they prepared, their bond grew even stronger. They shared moments of quiet conversation, exchanged small jokes, and laughed softly at minor mistakes. Despite the looming threat, they found solace in each other's presence. David learned more about her world, places of light, beauty, and advanced knowledge that surpassed anything he had known. She, in turn, learned from him about the human world, its simplicity, its resilience, and its warmth. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the alien woman shared more about the promises she had made. "I promised reward, but not as humans think," she said. "It is knowledge, protection, a chance to see beyond what is ordinary. You will understand when the time comes." David listened, intrigued but patient. "You don't need to explain everything now," he said. "We have time." She nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. The next day, they ventured outside to prepare supplies and check the perimeter once more. She moved gracefully, alert to every sound, every shadow. David followed her guidance, learning to anticipate changes in the environment. They practiced small maneuvers, simulating escape routes and testing ways to stay hidden. Each action brought them closer together, not just as companions, but as a team prepared for survival. Even in the face of danger, they found moments of peace. They shared meals, talked quietly by the fire, and sometimes sat in silence, simply enjoying the presence of each other. The alien woman taught David to see the world differently, its patterns, its subtle signs, and the ways in which knowledge could provide safety and understanding. David, in turn, shared human skills, humor, and the comforts of a simple life. As another night fell, the alien woman became thoughtful. "We cannot stay hidden forever," she said softly. "But we can prepare for when the time comes." David nodded, understanding the inevitability. "Then we prepare," he said, "and we will face it together." For days, they continued their preparations. Supplies were gathered, escape routes mapped, and signals established. The alien woman taught David how to sense subtle shifts in the air and the ground, skills he had never imagined. They practiced silently, coordinated their movements, and created a plan that could keep them safe if the hunters returned. Through it all, their bond deepened. Trust, once fragile, became unshakable. Compassion and understanding grew into a silent, shared commitment. They had become more than allies. They were partners in survival, linked by experience, fear, and hope. Finally, after several days of tense preparation, the alien woman spoke again of leaving. "I must eventually contact my allies for true safety, but I want to stay a little longer to prepare and to trust you fully," David nodded. "Then stay," he said. "We'll be ready together. You are safe here." She smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, "for your courage and your kindness, for trusting me and letting me trust you." The night was quiet, but outside the wind carried the memory of approaching danger. Inside, the fire burned brightly, illuminating the small house and the bond that had formed between them. They were ready, not just to face the hunters, but to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had built trust, courage, and hope, preparing for the inevitable confrontation that would come. And as they sat side by side, watching the flames dance, David realized that their story had grown far beyond a simple act of compassion. It had become a tale of partnership, survival, and the extraordinary possibilities that could unfold when two beings from entirely different worlds joined forces in trust and understanding.